Welcome to the Creative Warriors Podcast, the female heart and soul of photography. All right, we are welcoming back Anushri, and we are going to talk more about storytelling and some more creative elements that help us to create a clear expression and get a little bit more creative in our work. So welcome back.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
All right. So before we talk about some of these creative choices that we make, what are some of the biggest challenges that you have in being expressive in your work?
I think going through that, going through that period of monotony, the creative rut is, a very big thing that comes into play when you're trying to express yourself in any kind of photography. And, not being able to say what you want to say honestly through your pictures is what happens when there's there's a big gap between what you're thinking and what you're creating. So I think that happens when, firstly, you're not in that place. You're just not mentally there. Physically, you might be present everywhere, but mentally, you're like somewhere else. And I feel that happens when there's a creative rut and when there's, this moment where you're like completely blank. So that happens once in a few years, maybe sometimes even twice in a year it might happen, but it happens when we overdo the whole creating, and then don't give ourselves a break to play around or to explore things. Yeah, it happens. And also, in the beginning of my photography, I did go through that challenge where I knew, intuitively what I wanted to create, but, maybe I was not technically there to create exactly that, and that was very frustrating. So I feel that was one of the biggest challenges I failed in, as an expressing point of in photography. I was not able to create exactly what I wanted to do because there was a gap between my my brain creating, visualizing something, and me producing something else. So that gap was really big. And that frustrated the hell out of me. And that led me to, push myself more and more and learn more about photography, about elements, about, everything that goes into the big art and science that is.
I know that creative rut is a stopper for a lot of people. I think it was early on I learned from one of my many mentors and fellow photographers that it's like a flow. It's like the ocean. It comes and it goes. So it's part of the process. So it's not something that needs to stop us. We just need to understand when we're in that lull or that low period, it's time to like fill up. It's like if you're hungry.
Yeah.
If you're hungry, you eat, right?
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. If you're in a creative lull, you're really hungry. You just don't know it. You're not identifying it. So the sooner you identify that, oh, I need to take a break from this. I need to read a book, go on a walk, leave my camera at home, whatever it is that fills you, then you have the energy. Then you have it just comes naturally after that. But if you don't fill yourself, you get stuck.
Yeah, it's so funny how, these things happen and they happen to each and every one of us. So you very rightly put it that it's like, you're low on fuel and you just need to fill up. So I think, yeah, that happens a lot of times to me. And then I fill myself up with art in other forms. I do a lot of painting. I love watercolors. So a lot of times I actually visualize and I make that, that picture with watercolor before I capture it. I've done it a few times actually.
Oh, I love watercolor.
Yeah.
Watercolor actually brought me to photography, as funny as that is.
Oh, wow. Actually, photography took me back to watercolors now.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
I love watercolor. Do you have any of your work posted, or is it something you do for yourself?
My watercolors?
Yeah.
Actually, I have a wall full of my watercolors in my house, but I've not posted my watercolors anywhere because it's for personal consumption mostly. Although now, I've joined a group of ladies who do watercolors together. And then, that's a very recent thing. And then at the end of the year, we have a big sale and we sell our, items and all that. So, yeah, hopefully then I will have something there. Yeah. That's a personal that's going on.
I would love to see what you do with your watercolors. So when you are ready to share, let us know.
You know what? I do these projects where I go through this months of everyday one watercolor. It's like the 365 project.
Okay.
So it's a way to keep my creativity flowing with a break in my photography. So, there'll be like, I did 3 years of the project 365, but although I don't post so much because I'm not that out there kind of a person, I, keep things to myself, a lot of them. So a lot of my photography projects are very personal. But when I did my, like I did a few months of watercolors every day, I saw how, just a simple change in watercolors every day made such a big difference to my pictures, so to my paintings. And that's when I also started changing small little things in my photography. So I feel photography and art in general it's a lifelong learning process. You can never be full on that tank. It's always gonna, like the capacity is always gonna increase and you're gonna keep filling it, filling it, filling it, filling it. And it's never gonna overflow. That's the kind of thing art is.
I agree, and it each level and each genre, so to speak, kind of taps into another one.
Yes.
So the more you learn about one style, that kind of leads you to another style that you didn't even explore before, and now you're fascinated by, and that which then leads you to another one, and it's kind of like this journey that's just joyful because there's all this
doors to different new one and different
exactly.
I didn't know this existed. Oh my god, this! Oh my god, this! So yeah, it's like a very joyful journey. Yes.
All right, so let's talk about some creative techniques. So things like, tell me if you use these or if you do it intuitively or on purpose. But if what do you think about some of these techniques in your using your storytelling and some of those things you've developed through the years in your photography? So like balance and tension. How have you trained yourself to see that, or do you make this as a compositional choice?
No, I feel it's a very important thing to think about in any photograph because, there's a very thin line between that balance and that tension. So, there are these elements which bring a certain tension in your picture, but then, like eliminating or adding something to it or, like changing some certain element of your photograph will bring back the balance. So that's how, I kind of think of this. So it's a very kind of very, like very difficult thing to bring balance to this whole thing. In photography, kind of every picture comes with its own tensions, and then how I, like add elements or remove elements or align them or compose them is, to bring back the balance in the picture.
So do you prefer a balance in your picture versus tension, or do you use both?
No. Both. It depends. Like sometimes I cannot take that tension out because I love it. It's the play in my, photography then when the tension is there. But then I don't want to bring the balance back.
Right.
It's like that. So it's a very, as I said, it's a very thin line. Sometimes you want to, like kind of go towards tension. Sometimes you want to go towards balance. But then you should know what elements to juggle around.
Exactly. And sometimes the story is what is bringing the tension or the balance.
Yes.
Okay.
So that storytelling is very important. That umbrella is very big where, that storytelling umbrella is very big. So there are like gazillion elements to it. And, some elements might bring balance, some elements might bring tension. But yeah, of course, some people prefer the balance in photography. So a lot of clients, so one of my clients, now that we are coming to this part, one of my clients actually questioned me because he did not like the tension I created in a few pictures in the whole deliverable set. And, like it's just, moving things around to which, which is visually pleasing to you and intuitively giving you the yes signal at that point, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So for me, they were a yes, but for them, it was not. And then, like we had to discuss about this, that why I did what I did. And yeah, it happens. Yes.
Yeah,
so
I would think with family dynamics in themselves, like say a couple was, I'm just going to talk out loud here, but if a family was having a problem and they had a shoot and they're trying to pretend or present a harmonious, we're a happy family when they're really struggling. And then the pictures show the tension that you saw and felt. I could see them not being happy with that because it's too real, if that makes any sense. So I don't know if that gets to be.
So actually, this is between a couple actually. So, like a very intimate moment looking into each other's eyes is what, caused this whole havoc. And I felt it was a very beautiful moment and they felt it was made up, but it was not. Maybe at that moment, they were thinking something else and they knew what that moment was, right? They knew what that was. But, it was a very, very beautiful moment. And it was, that tension was very, like amazing. It was very lovable. That tension was very lovable overall. And then they were like, no, we don't like this. Can you click another? I said, that moment is gone. That moment is gone. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So I was very happy about this. Yeah, this happens, And but as I very like very clearly mentioned, this line is very very thin line in between them, and sometimes you don't even know that you've crossed that line.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your intuitive behavior will let you cross it. So you might move towards more balance or more tension depending on how you're feeling at that moment. And that's exactly what happened when I clicked that couple. And I felt it was a stunning moment. As a photographer, I saw so much love, but maybe they had some other thoughts going on in their mind at that time. And they relived those moments when they saw those pictures. It didn't work. So yeah, it didn't work for them, is what I mean.
That's okay, right? We can't hit it 100%. That's the other thing we have to learn. Not every picture resonates with our audience like we hope.
Yeah.
And that's, again, it's just the way it works. What about energy in your work? Especially if you have young children and they're running around, do you use a lot of energy or do you kind of try to keep how do you use energy in your work? Visual.
Lots of it. So, when I meet a family, the first thing I start visualizing is how I'm going to, make those children shine bright with all that energy. It's actually very true that whole, like children bring a lot of energy to a shoot. And when you play around with them, and when you make them run around, twirl and dance and jump and just, like throw them around, these kind of things not just brings the energy out of the child, but also out of the family because they smile and they laugh and, they love it. It's the kind of, it's what they want in their children. They want the children to be laughing always. And these little things, the giggles and the twirls and the happiness is just what they need at that moment. And them in the background, sometimes they come out so well and it's a beautiful shot always. So actually one of the pictures that I've shared is those two girls twirling in the jacaranda is one of my favorite pictures. It's my entry picture into my website also. It's actually my favorite picture forever.
I'm going to make sure that becomes the cover for this one. Awesome. Sure. Yeah, I think especially with children, there's just a really neat dynamic when they're in their playful state. And you can capture that. It's really pretty.
It just takes them out of everything else in this world. They just want to enjoy.
And I think it takes us out of it too. As the viewer, I mean, do you know what I mean by that? When I look at children at play, everything that's waiting as an adult kind of dissipates.
Fades away, yes.
Yeah.
It's also, it's everywhere. Like if the parents are coming to a shoot with two young children, they have this stress in them that, oh my God, my child is not going to, behave the way he's supposed to behave. And so, I always tell them
spilled on their outfit already.
It's okay if they spill. It's okay because that's them. That's their dynamic. That's how they are as a child or as a person. And I always tell the parents to just calm down because the first and foremost, like energy disruptor for children is the parents getting negative.
Yeah.
And that's, like totally dissipated the moment the children start enjoying. So I generally start my shoots with children running around. I do all their shots and, like I make them do whatever they have to do in their individual things, in their groups and with the family. And then the children can be out. Then it's time for couples, individual parents, and all those kind of, those shots that I take. But the children are then out of the picture. So they get their time of rest once they're done with it. And those energy shots really work in my favor because they get them tired and then they want to sit down, and I'm happy about it.
There's great wisdom in that process.
Yeah, it's just, like this is learning from my own experiences that you have to tire your child out. I'm sure you know that.
Yes, I do. I think you have great there's great wisdom in that process, definitely, for sure. I can tell you've done it a few times. Okay, I have an odd question for you. When you are producing your work, now we have like standard, especially in the US, I don't know how it is in the different parts of the world that you've lived, but we have standard frame sizes, right? That we're forced to have our pictures fit in, right? Of course, we can always go outside that box, and the camera shoots at a different ratio. So when you're framing shots and when you're thinking about the end result, like this would be beautiful on a wall, do you think about whether you want a square or rectangle, or you just shoot within your camera's frame and then worry about the rest later? Just wondering if that geometry is a part of your process.
It is very much a part of my process. So I always think of it in the way that if I am to frame this picture in my house, would I want it to be a landscape frame? What size would I want it to be working with? Like what kind of frame would I want? What size of the frame would I want? Do I want a landscape or a portrait? So, in my whole landscape of things, the whole shoot, I always make sure that there are some portrait shots, some landscape shots, and I leave some extra space while clicking so that I can resize it, the picture, as per the requirement of the client if needed. Otherwise, I give them a standard size, 4x6. That's what they can work with. But if they ask for something else, of course, there is space to work on that. Always.
Yeah, it takes practice to make sure you add that space. Because a lot of times, you make the frame in your, especially I think when you're working with mirrorless cameras, I don't know if it's the same with a non-mirrorless, but you frame the shot and that is the shot. But if you know that you might resize this to another ratio, if you don't allow that room, it doesn't crop well. And you're like, oh man.
Gives you that advantage, a full frame sensor.
Yeah. I mean, some of the cameras will show you the different boxes inside the viewfinder, which is kind of nice, but not all of them.
I don't know. The Canon R is, I think you bought the first mirrorless, right? I think it's a crop sensor. I'm not so sure about it.
R is full frame.
Oh, I thought it's a.
And then there's a series of full frames, but I think 7 is the first crop in the mirrorless. Oh, okay. Going, down. So the 10 is crop. I think 6 is full frame.
6 is full frame. I think R5 is also full frame.
Yes.
That's why those are the two options that I had in mind. But I didn't research a lot about the others. So that's why I think I made a mistake on the R.
And I might be wrong because, I've been wrong before. Just saying. It happens.
Not know it all. Everybody can't know it all. So it's okay.
I'm a Canon girl myself.
Oh, I love Canon.
But now I'm curious, is it crop or not? Because it is full frame. Okay. So I wasn't crazy. All right. I feel better now. All right. We can go on to something more important. Okay. What about inclusion and exclusion? I know that's something that you really develop an eye as the more you become more thoughtful in your work. Because sometimes just that one little thing in the corner of your frame can completely make your that distraction or whatever, or it's competing element in the frame. So how do you work with either including or excluding? How do you use those elements in your work?
So I think that's one of the first points you learn as a photographer. And even when I was teaching, this was one of the first points I taught as part of composition, that knowing what to leave and what not to, leave. And as a person also, you develop an eye to see what is going to be a distraction in your image and what is going to enhance your image. So But I shoot in public places, and many a times I don't have the option to pick people out and tell them that get out of my frame and do this. But yes, Photoshop really works wonders over there. The cloning and everything is the one of the best things I've learned in Photoshop is cloning. It really helps me in or exclude things from my frame. Yeah, it's a very important factor. So I still remember, teaching a mobile phone photography workshop, and this was the easiest tip to teach that while you're framing your shot, remove that pole, remove that tree, and see how it's going to look without those things. And once you see how it, like how your frame looks without it, then you can do what you want. You know how it looks with those, and you know how it looks without those. So learn to see both sides of it. So the inclusion, exclusion, both, you have to actually, like try both to learn what is your style of doing things.
That's good advice, actually, because sometimes we learn by, seeing what doesn't work, not just what does.
And you forget, actually, if you don't practice that ways, you sometimes forget, in a hurry, you're like, okay, let's just click.
And then you get a pole through somebody's head or...
like one of my mentors, one of the one of the guys I did a class with in India, he actually told me, always walk in with your cameras, don't zoom in with the lens, walk in with your camera and see how the close-up looks, and walk out and see how the surroundings with the subject looks, and then see on your right, on your left, when you move your camera to the right or to the left, how things are looking as against your subject, and then frame your shot finally. And I think that was one of the best advices that I received from him.
Yeah, that is very good. So you're almost exploring through your lens and then making the decision.
Yes.
Ah, good idea. I love these tips and tricks. And
yeah, it's actually something that I always use. And when I do those trial runs for my shoots and go to parks and locations, there are roads actually where I go and like click pictures. So, there are houses that are there, and that these roads, those houses cannot be avoided. So then I look for how I can frame my picture. I go and do it in advance. That's the planning part of my photography, which I spoke about earlier, where I, go in advance to see how I can get the best out of those streets and those canopies and,
those
kind of things. Yeah.
So you do a lot of location scouting?
Yes, planning? I used to till like last year. I did a lot of location scouting, but now I've narrowed things down to a few, places in Johannesburg, in Pretoria, a few parks, a few trails, walking trails, which are really good, and few places where like in spring it flowers, few places where autumn is beautiful. So I know exactly where to go for what now.
Oh, that's nice.
It's taken me 3 years to, pin down those places. So I actually have notes in my phone on where to go for what.
and what time of year, right? Which is important.
Where to go for like what autumn, where to go for spring, where to go, like in winters. So yeah, I have it all listed in my phone. And my husband, sometimes he's like, how many notes and how many streets have you noted down in that phone of yours? I said, I have to have the location. I can't at that moment think that, oh my God, which street was that? I have actually dropped pins in so many places because I want those exact locations.
A very useful tip there too. Pins on a map.
Yes, pins on the map really help. And then you can just put, like what it is, like autumn trees.
Yeah.
Just jacaranda, like these kind of pins.
That's awesome pins. I like that. And since you've done this and you've moved frequently, this becomes probably easier and easier every time you do this because you're like, oh, now I got to find new locations.
Yeah. So, when I was in Dubai, in Mumbai, I knew exactly where because I've lived there for 12 years. Then we moved to Dubai. It took me a year to pin down those places I wanted to do those family shoots and on exactly when I wanted to do those. Because, Dubai 6 months is, like good weather, decent enough weather, and the rest of it is like hot. So you need to know the exact points and how they look. So going there and checking them out and, like finding those spots where you're going to create those pictures is very, very important. if you don't have those locations in place on time, it just wastes a lot of your precious time, shoot time with your clients, and the clients get frustrated. So this is one of the learnings from my various shoots, that if the client is happy, the shoot is definitely going to be really good.
Definitely. If they're not happy, it won't. I hear you.
That you can control. This is totally in your control. Do your homework, keep your equipment ready, keep everything clean, keep everything set. Both your cameras. That's why I carry two cameras, because I don't want to change my lenses very frequently. So once I'm done with, that is also very planned, that these are the shots I'm going to do first, then second, and then like wide angle, and then one, like few candid in the beginning. That's it. That's how it runs. It's very well planned.
Nice. That makes the process easier for you too. It's more, there's a pattern that works. Yeah.
There are things that, like go against you, that maybe a child, no matter what you do, has a fit. Then what?
Well, you take a picture of a child having a fit. No.
Take one or two, but the parents don't like it. So you're going to work around. You wait for them to calm down for a bit. Otherwise, just do what you can with your intuitiveness. Find your own way.
Yep.
Play around.
So here's a question for you. What is the difference for you between focusing the lens and focusing the eye in your photograph?
Okay, focusing the eye. Actually, I think our eyes are very magical and very, very dynamic. And so they actually are what is the input to our brain to create and focus through the lens. So I feel focusing the eye is the first step in photography. I focus and see what I want to see. Is, if you want to, I don't think there's a difference, because they can't be compared. These two factors can't be compared, because an eye is something, it's a gift from God, which we use to, as an input, which gives the input to my brain to tell me what to create. So focusing the lens is the output of that, where I use that camera and that lens to focus and then create what my eye created by focusing on something, some subject is what I can say is for.
Okay, so when you're doing landscape, let's go into the nature genre, and you're looking at this beautiful landscape, but there's one element that you want to draw attention to in that scene. So you may not want the whole scene in focus because you want to draw the eye to something. So how do you use that pulling the viewer's eye to the subject? What are some elements that you use to accomplish that? I think with people, the people are the subject, but in nature, sometimes it might be something more subtle. It might be a singular tree. It might be the whole scene, which is different than an element in the scene. So did that make sense, that question?
Yeah. I think the question is very different from what, I interpreted it to be.
That's okay.
I think it's just, using elements like, of course, depth of field is, my aperture is one of the biggest thing that I work around with, which I use in my camera, and which is now helping me focus on that particular subject to create that as a that as a standout in my image, right?
And the separation between that and whatever's behind it,
and the foreground and the background, that kind of, that is what I would use. And sometimes, also kind of, if there is a possibility of a leading line to that particular element, or a gradation to that element, to bring that element out more. So kind of creating depth with layers to that element, where you're focusing on that element, you focus on that point, but of course show a gradation in your landscape, in your elements in the landscape till that point, and then further in the background. So working with the foreground and background to show it more, to make it obvious.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you find that you talked about the fact that when you were younger in the photography world, that your you shot more intuitively, but then the more you learned, the more you taught, the more you were specific about all these different pieces that we put together in a single photograph and make a bunch of choices relatively quickly. Do you find that having all of this kind of knowledge and why you would use one over the other has made the process easier for you in the field, or do you think about things a little bit more deeply before you hit the shutter?
So, yes, it has made my process easy because some things come very naturally to me now. Like what I had to think about earlier, even though the shot was thought intuitively, I had to think about the settings and, like what kind of composition I'm going to use, what kind of elements I'm going to add. But now, because of practice over the years, some of those things are a very natural thing to me. They're a natural part of the process, so they just happen without even me thinking. And then I have more space in my brain to get creative with my shot. So I feel that they've really helped me and they've made my life easy and this whole process very, very streamlined. And then also given me more, space to kind of spread my creativity into that shot.
Wonderful. All right, that's going to lead us right to where we're going on our next episode. So I'm going to leave off here and we're going to talk more about drawing the eye, more about feelings and mystery, and bringing the heart into our photographs. So we will come back again and we will talk about those. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. Look forward to the next one.
Remember to subscribe or follow the Creative Warriors on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. If you have any thoughts, suggestions, or questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at ariel@arielfaithphotography.com. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep the conversation going. Stay curious and have a happy artistic journey. Thank you for listening to the Creative Warriors podcast, the female heart and soul of photography. See you next episode.